Today I'm going to change this timing gears and the timing chain. This is on a 1983 5.8 liter and an E150. It's kind of what my van looked like when it was new. Truck's 30 years old now, and it's got probably over 200,000 miles on this engine. To determine whether you're supposed to change the chain or not, Chilton says you're supposed to tighten up this chain, establish a reference point, and then loosen it and see what the deflection is. I tightened up this side instead. You can see the right hand side of that red line on the index card is about where that chain would be if it were tight. I push it over here and measures deflection, each of those columns being 1/4 inch wide, and deflection's less than 1/2 inch, so I don't have to change it. But once you take a timing chain cover off, you might as well change it. Timing chain cover's off because I had to get in here and pull out the water pump, and when I took out the water pump I broke off 3 bolts. 2 of the bolts were studs that had the tops busted off into the block. This one over here and this one on this side. To get those out, you have to take the timing chain cover off, and I use propane on the block. It goes about 2,000 degrees, and with vice grips I was able to wiggle the studs out. The one that broke off from the timing chain cover I'm going to have to drill and use an easy out on. I'll use the propane on it as well. I thought it was an aluminum cover, but I think it's just pot metal. I was able to put that propane on. The propane will melt aluminum, but I kept the tip of the blue flame about 1/2 inch from the cover, and it doesn't seem any the worse for wear. I got into this because of a leak on the water pump. Went on about a 600-mile trip, and I noticed the temperature gauge was running at 200 degrees Fahrenheit, and my thermostat is 195 degrees Fahrenheit. And when I checked the level, it was a gallon low on permanent. And take off the radiator cap, and it was dribbling in a steady stream out from behind the water pump. I've got the timing marks set up. You can see the timing mark on the lower one there is just at the keyway. It's a little dot. I'm supposed to line these dots up. And then I attach the eccentric to operate the fuel pump to the gear. I've got the rotor lined up on number 1. There's the back end of the rotor, and you see the number 1 plug wires back here. So the back end of the rotor is lined up on number 6. I don't know if it's a compression stroke or not, but it doesn't matter. I need those points lined up before I change these gears out. Okay, timing chain's been replaced. I actually had to tap this on with my mini maul because this chain's so damn tight now. You'll notice there's no movement of this chain now at all, and my mark should be lined up. There's a mark on this one, and you can see the keeper for the eccentric right there. Those 2 are in line. No slack at all on that chain. Got a nice flame going. Got to get that tip of the blue flame to right down in there. Everything's going to get really hot now. The idea being to bring that broken stud up to temperature, so when I start welding, the molten metal and that stud will become one. I'll weld everything to that flat washer, then I'll weld a nut to that flat washer. This propane probably about 2,000 degrees. And the pot metal can take more than that, so I've no danger of melting it. I've got the weld put in on top of that washer. You got to get that stick right down inside there and be sure to hit that stud, and slowly build up the weld and then move outwards and onto the washer. I'm going to grind that off and then clamp a nut on there and weld the nut to the washer. Here's the setup. I decided to use a 3/8 bolt We got it clamped down on top of the project with the ground welder strap sitting close by. The whole thing about welding is getting your jig so that nothing moves when you hit it with the stick. So we'll weld that bolt right to the washer that I ground off. I ground off the weld a little flat so I can get that bolt to stand up straight. Okay, got the bolt welded on there. All done with less than one welding stick. And I'll clamp the timing chain cover in a vise and put a 9/16 wrench on there and see if I can twist that out of there. If I get a little bit out, then and there's more left, I'll just try it again. Okay, I've hit this with some PB blaster. The idea before pulling this out is I want everything to cool down. You can see it's still smoking a little. PB blaster is slightly flammable, but I'm going to let this thing cool down before I put a wrench on it. Alright, it's cooled down quite a bit. I can put my fingers on it. It's warm to the touch. In case anybody's interested, this was I used a 3/32 size welding rod. It's about all my little buzz box can handle. It's a 6011 rod. In this case here, you can see the bolt hole actually goes all the way through, although I do not have a straight shot at it from the back end. So I squirted some liquid wrench in there, or PB blaster, and got this bolt welded on. Now I'm going to try to twist it off of there. Okay, it didn't work. It's really hard to get the stick down in there to capture that stud, get some weld on it. If I had to do this all over again, I probably would have just drilled it all out and made it a slightly larger size. But I am going to keep at this. I'm going to try to weld another one on there and see what happens. Okay, this time I was a little more aggressive, shall we say, about getting the stick down in there and touching that stud. So I'll let this cool down a little, grind that off, and weld another bolt on there. Another bolt welded on now. I'm going to let that cool down, spray it with some liquid wrench, and try to twist it off again. Welding on that stud, finally got it out. But it took 6 tries. I think if I had to do this again, I would not use an easy out. In fact, I will never use an easy out on anything that's stuck. If I was going to do this again, I would get a left-hand drill bit, drill the hole in a counterclockwise direction, and that might actually back out the stud. If that didn't work, then could try to weld it like I did this time, and if that didn't work, I could always drill it out larger yet and use a helicoil. Thing is, this is 30 years old and it's a simple component replacement job. There's no reason to pay a mechanic to do that. I mean, what are they going to do that you can't do? It's just unbolt and bolt on, plus the headaches associated with this. I think the reason this worked is because when I used my 3/32 welding rod, I forced it down in there and made prolonged contact with the stud that was in there. Notice my buzz box can only handle a 3/32 rod. It can't even handle an 1/8 inch rod. That's how low of amperage it is. There's the buzz box. Thing is at least 60 years old. You can't even hardly read anything that's on it. I just crank it up, plug it into 120 volts, and it works really well for me as long as I'm not welding anything greater than 1/8 inch plate. Anything larger than that, I got to preheat it with the oxyacetylene torch. Okay, I got to clean this thing up, clean the surfaces off, chase all the threads, then we'll be on to the next thing. My name is Ben Hassey, and I'm the man. timing chain covers installed along with the harmonic balancer and the fuel pump. The bolts are actually just snugged down using a 3/8 ratchet and a shorty box wrench. Just wanted to pull everything down, get the gasket snug and the RTV set. This actually sat all night. And I'll check the torque specs later. I installed the bottom bolts first just to pull the timing chain cover down in place so I can get the other bolts to line up. You can see that gasket has like a handhold. That's to help you position it to get everything lined up properly, but that was no trouble at all with the RTV sticking everything together. These 4 bolts are actually placeholders for the water pump. I just put those on there to snug everything down well. Putting the fuel pump in, remember that operates off an eccentric, and with the timing marks lined up, that eccentric's all the way down to the bottom. I had to rotate the crankshaft clockwise, get that eccentric moved up out of bottom dead center. Rotating it clockwise caused that rotor to move counterclockwise, and used to be lined up on number 1, now it's lined up on between number 3 and number 7. I think what I'll do next is change that thermostat. I want to go to 180 degrees Fahrenheit and get the lines hooked up to that fuel pump. Got to pull those bottom bolts out of the timing chain cover and anti-seize them. Everything else is anti-seized. And then check the torque specs. Got this fuel pump all hooked up now. Got the steel line going to the carburetor. Got the thermostat housing on, my new thermostat in there. Looks like the next thing to do is put that water pump on. Maybe add the accessories for alternator and the air pump. That'll be the next. Looks like I got the wrong water pump. One on the left here being the new one. Kind of light gauge, aluminum. Missing a lot of mounting holes that I need. It will bolt in to the block, however I won't be able to attach any of my accessories. Here's my old one, cast iron. Lots of extra holes in there for mounting stuff. Got to go back today and get the right one. When I started this job, I put a Ziploc bag, looks like that, zipped it over the end of each of the lines coming from the transmission. That's how much transmission oil is leaked out after all the funning around I've done. Simple water pump replacement job. So I've got to be sure to put new transmission oil back in. And of course I'll be using distilled water to go with the antifreeze. Alright, I'm going to change the oil. Waiting for the parts store to open up, so I'm going to change the oil. Before I started this job, after I got back from my 600-mile trip, I was at 3,000 miles on the old oil. So I changed it. Then I decided to do the water pump. And so there's brand new oil in the oil pan. But with all this monkeying around, I've got to wonder if there isn't something in the oil pan. Something nasty. So I'm going to drain all this out, 5 quarts worth, and we'll see what we get. And that's brand new oil coming out. We'll let that drain out and see if we catch anything. This is what the oil looks like after changing the oil, running it long enough to fill the oil filter. And I started on this job and never actually drained oil out immediately after an oil change. So this is what it looks like. It's pretty dark. Swirl it around. Looks brand new, draining off the screwdriver there. Okay, Still got some time before the parts store opens up. I should have my water pump in. I guess on the way I can find a watershed or storm drain to throw this oil out in. Engine compartment's ready for install of a water pump. This is what the job should have looked like when I went to change the water pump. You can leave all your accessories on, get full access there. Got the hoses out of the way, the fan. Got a piece of cardboard in front of the radiator, don't even mishaps there. I did not reinstall the air conditioning compressor. That thing never worked anyway. It's more important to have heat in the winter than cool in the summer up here. I'm ready for putting in the water pump as soon as I can get one. Went down and picked up my new water pump. Cast iron. Looks just like the old one now. I was told it cost the same as that piece of aluminum one. I don't think so. I think he gave me a break because I had to come back twice. So I'm going to paint this up and put it in, probably be on the road today. Got my new water pump all painted. Put the gasket on. RTV, both sides of that gasket, especially around the water jackets. Got 2 bolts to go on the far outside holes. Already anti-seized. I'm going to put this water pump in and fit those bolts in there, finger tight. See how she fits. Alright, put those 2 bolts in, this one here and this one here. Here's the next 2 to go in. All anti-seized up, ready to go. Notice they're not flange bolts. Flange bolts break. I can't find any replacements. I'm putting regular cap screws in there with washers on them. Those 4 I just put in are actually the 4 that go into the block. 1, 2, 3, 4. The next 2 I'm going to put in are going to go into the timing chain cover. One here and one up underneath here. They're little shorty bolts. We'll get those put in there now. That's 6 bolts in. 3 here, 3 there. The last 2 are going to go in the timing chain cover through here and through here. There are 2 odd sizes. Those 8 bolts are all that holds the water pump on. The rest have to do with bolting up my accessories. It should be noted none of these bolts actually go through to oil or water. They're all got a bottom to them, so I don't have to put like some kind of Loctite on there or something water resistant. I do use a lot of anti-seize, but can't blame me after what I've been through. Got all 8 of those bolts in. Torque fix called for 18 foot-pounds. Let me tell you, 18 foot-pounds is not very much. So I'm glad I only ran those in there finger tight to start with. Alright, I'm going to complete the assembly on the water pump and then install the rest of my accessories like power steering unit, fan shroud. Alright, the thing I want to point out here is the mounting bracket for the alternator. Hooks up right there, which is one of the bolts I torqued to 18 foot-pounds. So I had to back it out, put the bracket on, and torque it again. And in order to get these pulley bolts to stay lined up, I've gone ahead and tightened up the power steering pump belt. Now I'll back those bolts out, put the fan and this fan shroud in. It appears I've been given a radiator hose that's about 1/4 inch too long. Causes it to kink up back here. I compared it with my old hose and it's about 1/4 inch too long. So I'm just going to hacksaw that off. Okay, this project is nearly done. I've got everything tightened up. I put 3.5 gallons of distilled water in the cooling system. Getting ready to start it up and check for leaks. I did have a minor leak there. I didn't have that lower hose tightened enough on the water pump. But it's all tightened up now. No leaks. Cold iron. So let's start it up, see what we... Engine's running! 180-degree thermostat in there. It'll be a while. Alright, it's been about 3 minutes since I shut the camera off. Engine's still running. Temperature's coming up. There's about 180. Should go past it and then sink down below it as the thermostat opens up. We'll see what happens here. The 195 degree one in there would go up almost 210 degrees before it would fall back down while I was driving. It's almost 190 now. And there she goes. Got up about 193 or so. Engine's been running about 4.5 minutes. Go out there and feel the hoses and check for leaks again. One last shot. Engine's been running about 6 minutes. No perceived problems. Put some permanent in there and drive it down the road. I'm calling this job done. Oh yeah, don't forget to wipe down all your tools. Job's not over till the tools are wiped off and put away.